So for those of you who don't know, I'm Susan Pulido. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the campus confidential advocate. I'm joined here tonight by our Verity advocate, Bernice Mendez. So Bernice, if you want to stand up and wave and say hi. And Verity, our local rape crisis and trauma center, is actually here, and they're setting up some tables in the lobby to they'll be providing information about the services that they provide. Also, if at any point during and I'm going to do another content care warning, but if at any time during this presentation you feel like you would like to take a walk and talk to someone, there's folks out there who can help. I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I am housed in Beaujolais Village, and I'm in Classico 117. I have been doing advocacy and prevention work since 2004, while I was working as an alcohol and other drug and sexual violence prevention health educator at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell, Mass, as well as a survivor services manager at the Center for Hope and Healing, which is in Middlesex County in Massachusetts. I'm a transplant. I moved here in 2017, the night before the fires. And I'm happy to say that I'll be celebrating my 5-year anniversary here at this university in this role on April 9th. I am presenting today about rape culture. And as I said, this presentation is normally about a 2.5. To do it justice, it's a 2.5-hour presentation. And I've narrowed it down to an hour. It's a real brief sort of intro into rape culture and what we can do to end it here at Sonoma State University. I'm going to share more resources with you if you like. And most of the information I am presenting today is provided by the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance, one of the many national organizations that I utilize in my work. We have a national organization right here in California. It used to be CalCASA, and it is now known as Valor, and they're headquartered in Sacramento. And, there's a lot of great national organizations that provide resources and information as it relates to the work that I do under the umbrella of sexual violence, dating violence, domestic violence, sexual harassment, stalking, and exploitation. So without any further ado, I am going to begin. This is the content care warning that I was talking about. This content may impact you. It's okay. It's okay to be impacted. It's okay to feel. We all know someone who has been harmed in some way by what we're going to be talking about tonight. So if something comes up for you and you feel like you need to get some space, go breathe, take a walk. I mean, we had a splendid day today. Take a walk, take care of yourselves. And we're always available for connecting if anything comes up for you. And so with that said, I'm going to get right into it. So we hear this term rape culture frequently. When you all hear the term rape culture, what do you think of when you hear that term? And you can just use the microphone or shout it out.
I think of a culture that tends to blame the victim for things that happen to them.
Blame the victim. I'm sorry, I have my back. Blame the victim. What else? What else do you think of when you hear the term rape culture?
I think of the objectification of women's bodies.
Objectification of women's bodies. Objectification of women's body.
I specifically think of the lack of repercussions of offenders.
Lack of repercussions for offenders.
I also think of a culture where sometimes men feel entitled to a woman's body or time or energy or space.
Entitlement.
I think of when the victim does come out about their story, how people often don't believe them or side with the person that did it.
So thinking that that person would never do anything like
Yeah,
that. So
exactly.
we think that they didn't do it.
And then also having like repercussions from that. So the victim gets more repercussions than the actual person that did something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna put an exclamation point there because you went deeper into victim blaming. And again, that kind of aligns with the entitlement piece as well. Thanks.
Donald
What
Trump.
else? Huh?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Put the toupee on top of the triangle.
And I'm not doing this justice. I should have made a bigger triangle. You'll see the point that I'm doing with this exercise in a minute. What else do you think of?
I think of slut shaming and certain standards that are imposed on women from birth of how they must dress, how they must act, how they must speak and behave, or else they are deemed a slut.
Slut shaming. And you said another phrase, and I'm sorry it left my head. Standards of
How they must dress.
I'm gonna say, because what I'm hearing when you as you're saying that, it's sort of like oh my goodness, I'm so this is one of the things where I'm struggling with my brain tonight. It's like real, pardon me. Oh, well, yeah. Does somebody want to help me scribe? Thank you. It's real, those are rigid gender roles. That was the phrase that I was looking for. Rigid gender roles. People thinking that, and I'm going to use I'm thinking in the binary here now, that women have to behave and dress and are raised as women, and men have to behave and dress and are raised as men. And I'm not doing a good job of extrapolating on that like you did. And it's part of the whole culture. So thank you. What else?
I think of Hollywood and celebrities.
Okay, we'll put that here. What about Hollywood and celebrities?
Well, I think a lot of celebrities think they're like have power, and they tend to do like sexually assault women and never get blamed for it because they have the power to have hush money, or no one's gonna believe the woman because, you know, it's, I don't know, Tom Hanks or something. I'm not saying he did that, but I'm using that as an example.
Yeah,
And
that power differential.
right. And then I also think of Hollywood because I just think of like the power that they have there
Mm-hmm.
and how they're able to like kill off and just shut people up that would ever dare to speak up of something like that
Yes,
against
we saw
one of
that
their
with the
valid
Epstein.
members. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Like against one of their valid members.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
valued members, sorry.
Yeah, we're seeing
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of producers who have what is known as a casting couch. And And their victims are all genders. They they have to have those. They insist on those sexual favors from all genders. What else?
I think of a masculinity that's tied to violence.
Masculinity that's tied to violence. Yeah, I think we'll just put them in. Yeah. Masculinity that's tied to violence. You'll never hear me use the phrase toxic masculinity because when we want to call people in, we want to use language that is not going to immediately put them on the defensive. So you will always hear me use the phrase healthy masculinity. That's calling people in a manner that is a little more approachable for them. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to add, I think that when I think of rape culture, I think of a lack of resources for counseling for both the survivors or victims that underwent that experience, but also rehabilitation counseling for the offenders to understand why what they did was not okay and to understand what was driving that behavior in the first place.
So that's a really good point. Yes, there's not enough resources for survivors, and there's not enough resources for rehabilitation work, let's say. You know, where I'm a big proponent of restorative justice and transformative justice. And we see it. I'll share something that maybe I shouldn't share. And I think it's important to share it. I work with a lot of students who go through the Title IX process. And I can tell you that and it aligns with your point. So many students that I work with will say, I told this person that they raped me. I told this person that they harmed me. And all I wanted them to do was apologize to me. Transformative justice. All they were looking for was an apology and an awareness of what they did wrong. And they wouldn't do it. They would not apologize or own it and take accountability for it. Went through the Title IX process and in some instances were expelled. Okay. I think we have a whole bunch of great examples of rape culture that you all came up with. These are all spot on. Bernice, I gave her some handouts. Elliot, do you mind helping me? There are, I'm going to show you which ones I would like you to hand out. And this is great because there's enough of you to kind of break up into, if you wouldn't mind sharing this, this one, and this one. Thank you so much, Christina and Elliot. Okay, so as Christina and Elliot are handing those out, I'm going to actually share with you a couple of definitions of rape culture. A rape culture is one that normalizes and rationalizes sexual violence as inevitable and a part of a natural human behavior, rather than understanding violence as structurally and culturally created and sustained. It normalizes and rationalizes sexual violence as inevitable and a part of a natural human behavior. And the second definition I will share is aligned with that: a culture in which rape and sexual violence are accepted and expected norms due to societal attitudes and actions about gender and sexuality. It places the onus on the survivor. So, a lot of the things that you shared that were your thoughts and feelings about rape culture align with this definition of rape culture. I've handed out this rape culture pyramid. This is a horrible graphic on the screen. That's why I printed them, so you could have them and you could read them. So now I think about all of the things that you said, and we sort of I tried to do a pyramid that would align with the various elements of this particular pyramid. There are a couple of pyramids that you will see as, those of you that are social criminal justice majors, that are WGS majors, that are sociology majors. You see a lot of pyramid representation when it comes to violence pyramids and things like that. So I'm just going to share a couple with you. Looking at this pyramid, what you have in front of you, how do these thoughts and that you shared, how do they align with what's on that pyramid?
I just by looking at it, the entitlement and the blaming victim it reminds me a lot of, like, it says victim blaming and the boys will be boys, and like just dress codes in general.
Yeah. Did you raise your hand?
I noticed that the stuff that we all verbally put onto that pyramid are more of cultural from this pyramid. And none of us actually mentioned like anything higher up, like actual rape or like sexual comments or non-consensual sharing of, like, none of us mentioned actual physical actions. We more mentioned like cultural beliefs.
Yeah. Which is fine, because that's where it all starts. Actually, it all starts at the bottom of the pyramid with each of the structures that are in place: homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, racism, sexism, ableism, classism, colonialism. That's the base that allows for rape culture to occur and for sexual violence to occur. So what else do you notice? How were your responses different? You mentioned a few. How else were your responses different from what is present on that pyramid? You nailed it. You really did. You nailed it. I did a presentation a couple of years ago. Okay, this is something that's probably a little much, but I did a presentation a couple of years ago with a department on campus, and talked about, you mentioned, and I'm sorry, I forget your name. Grayson, you mentioned the boys will be boys piece. And this particular department, so we were talking about the bottom of the pyramid, and I happened to mention the locker room talk and the boys will be boys piece in it. And these people really came for me, and they said, well, girls will be girls. And I said, I've never heard that before. Can you please tell me what that means? And even in that exchange was contributing to rape culture, because they were dismissing the boys will be boys content and trying to bring something in that didn't even exist, that hasn't been heard of and is not a thing. So, we encounter this every day in our everyday relationships, in our everyday exchanges. All right, I will move on a little bit and just ask, which of the items in the pyramid that you're looking at are visible and which are invisible?
Well, I noticed that like the stuff that more pertains with like our cultural beliefs are more invisible. And so they're more like just like interwoven into our daily lives and society. And we don't really generally notice them because they aren't so overt. And then the stuff that's more visual would obviously be like flashing someone, more like physical actions that harm a person.
So you're mentioning, when you say flashing, you're mentioning things that are at the middle of the pyramid and above, pretty much. What else is visible or invisible?
Definitely like the homophobia and transphobia are they're visible, but they're not visible at the same time. Like someone getting hate crime because they're LGBT or whatever, or it could be as little as like someone like not really responding because they are like trans or they are gay. And so it could be as minor as like a very invisible thing, or it can be very visible depending on where you are and who it is.
Mm-hmm. What else is visible or invisible?
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I think intention in the context of some in circumstances leading up to the event. A lot of people will blame the fact that the victim or the survivor led them on as an excuse, whereas sometimes the communication may be vocally invisible, but as people interacting with other people, we can use context of body language. And so I think that sometimes that context is invisible to some people where it is extremely visible to others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing here non-consensual sharing of sex and nudes, and I guess that's sort of what's invisible because when one thinks of the word rape, they usually think of the physicality aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's a really good point. We're talking about rape culture here, and rape is indicative. When we hear that word, it's a legal term, and the culture itself is so much bigger than the act of rape. It's called rape culture. That's how we refer to it, and it's so much more than the act of rape or the crime of rape. So thank you for pointing that out. In my observation, I say that a lot of the bottom of the pyramid is invisible. Especially, well, I think you've done a really good job of explaining what the ones are that are visible and invisible. And I think that, we also see things like what's missing from this pyramid. And you have this one as well, right? What's missing from this pyramid? Can you think of anything that's missing from this pyramid? And I want to be clear that these pyramids, they don't measure or rank types of harm. What they do is they show how behaviors, beliefs, and systems are built on and work in conjunction with one another. So this isn't like a continuum, if you will. It's showing how things are built on and interrelate in conjunction with one another.
One thing that I feel like could be somewhat missing from the green pyramid, it does say victim blaming, but when I think about, like, for example, when young boys are victims to older females, like maybe like their teacher, the victims aren't really blamed, they're more like congratulated. It's almost like little boys can't be victims because it's like sexual conquest is seen as a sign of masculinity and a positive good for men, even if they're children, which is insane, obviously. But so, I mean, I mean, I don't know if that counts as victim blaming. I would kind of consider it like, I don't even know. Yeah, it's just like general misogyny and gender roles, but
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's that, and I support a lot of male survivors who really struggle with that, because there are people who say to them, why would you think that you were sexually assaulted? It's that expectation, it's that strict gender role that, oh, this should have been something that person should have welcomed. And it's not welcome at all. It's horrific and horrible. So I love that you pointed that out. Thank you so much. I'm going to add that. What else is missing?
all of the intersections, like with racism, with classism, ageism. The green pyramid doesn't really show how rape culture interacts with all of that.
It's the basis of it all. You know, it's the basis of it all. It's the starting point. And it's those thoughts and beliefs that stem from all of the intersections. Yeah. And that's why I bring up, we'll get to this one. That's why I include this one. This is another pyramid of sexual violence. This is a clearer picture than the one that you have. And I think that this has even more categories of things down with where I have the rape culture red arrow. We talk about, you've mentioned victim blaming, you've mentioned slut shaming, bragging. Bragging is part of it. Conquest, part of it. And I talked about the strict gender rules. Objectification, you mentioned that, and we're going to get into that a little bit too. Rape jokes. Presentation of sexual assault in media. In some shows that we watch, it's not gratuitous. In some things that we watch, it's necessary. And in other things that are broadcast, it's gratuitous. Pornography today is so available, and so much of pornography contributes to rape culture. Many people are watching pornography and thinking that is how sex really occurs. And I was talking to somebody the other day who said that I'm going to celebrate this. They said, I don't shave and I'm proud of my bush. And I was like, I embrace that. Pornography doesn't allow for that. So there's, again, I'm sharing this pyramid of sexual violence with you because I think it's important to see that there are other, and I think that this is where we're making the interconnection. This is where we see where sexual violence and racial violence are, as we move up, and in this case, as we move up the pyramid, we see the attitudes and beliefs that really form everything as a result of the intersections of the isms. And I just want to ask real quickly, what do you notice about this pyramid? And then I'll move on from the pyramid. What do you notice especially about the racial violence pyramid? Because we've really covered the sexual violence one. Or the rape culture one.
I think that people were pointing out the lack of intersectionality before, and I think this is an attempt to do both intersectionality and then a hierarchy of harm, like
Mhm.
resulting in individual death or systemic death with genocide, femicide, some of those you had in the earlier slide. So I think it's probably trying to represent interpersonal versus systemic relations that are more societal, institutional, structural, as opposed to just cultural beliefs.
Yes. Thanks, Caitlin.
No problem.
And again, this is another national organization that I utilize, PCAR, Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. They're another great national organization that I utilize for a lot of the work that I do. And exactly, this is it's, if you look at it, it's the attitudes and beliefs, and then it's the individual acts of prejudice, and then the institutional discrimination, and the violence, and then the point is death. And they mention in their adverse childhood experiences. I'm going to talk about the research that's been done, the adverse childhood research that's been done in the past and how it contributes. I like this slide. I like this pyramid because it does show what you pointed out, Elliot, the as Caitlin mentioned, the interconnectedness. So we've talked about examples of rape culture. Actually, I will go back real quick. How do the words on the bottom relate to the words on the top? And maybe it will help if you look at your handout versus the screen. How do these words relate? The words on the bottom relate to the words on the top.
So on our campus, an example that we talked about with some people in class last year that are in this room, right? Maybe attitudes and belief of the ex-president's husband feeling entitled to use the staff members' bodies, individual acts of maybe not necessarily prejudice, but impropriety, physical harm, emotional harm, abusing the position of power where people felt they couldn't say no or did say no, and there was no institutional support, and then institutional discrimination, resulting in people losing their jobs because they were trying to advocate. From what I understand, I don't know as much as some people, obviously, but it seems like what people felt like was a cover up resulted in people who had tried to advocate for people who felt harmed in the situation getting pushed out of their jobs, and sort of institutional discrimination that happened there.
Yeah. We all learned about this from the Los Angeles Times and the Press Democrat. We didn't even get any information about this. And so all we know is what we know from what's been in the press, because all of these matters are private matters. So
Can I just add a layer of complexity though? So I think also, I was in our previous session, we just went to the student radio station, and up on the wall it says Jail Judy, right? And so as a woman of color whose husband was passing as a white man, I don't know exactly all the dynamics, right? She's being targeted for physical acts of violence and incarceration because of the actions of her husband, which I don't know anything about how she was or wasn't aware. And then students are calling for her to be incarcerated, not necessarily for him to face consequences, right? And she ended up divorcing him, as far as I know. I don't know a ton about the facts, but that there would be this gendered call for the physical violence of jail against the president because she tried to, or somehow someone was forced out of their job because of her husband's behavior and her covering it up, is an example I saw like half an hour ago on our field trip for the last session.
And thank you, because who did the act? Who was responsible for harassing the women? Her husband. And we're saying incarcerate Judy? What about the perpetrator? What did we say about the perpetrator? So thank you for saying that and pointing that out. I really appreciate that. What else? What are the other things that what words do you think relate interrelate from the bottom and the top? Or each other?
When I look at the words on the bottom and the words on the top, what I notice is I feel like it all starts at the bottom and people use each individual level to justify the next level. Like someone will take their attitude and belief and justify then committing an individual act of prejudice. And then people who believe that will justify institutional discrimination. And then that can lead to violence and that leads to death. So I just feel like it's all interconnected and it all builds upon itself.
Yeah. And Caitlin, we have our IT.
Well, thank you. Well, I just really would love to hop off of your point. I learned this process in social psychology class about how these biases are made. And you're absolutely right. It does follow the process of how our prejudices and our biases are integrated into our everyday mindset. And so I definitely agree. I think that, these attitudes and beliefs, they're justified. And because these people are mentally justifying these actions, it becomes part of their everyday behavior without even thinking about it. So,
Yes. It's ingrained. It's institutionalized. It's everything that you both just shared. Now I'm going to ask a really important question. At which level does our campus invest the most energy to interrupt these forces?
could you repeat that again?
At which level does our campus invest the most energy to interrupt these forces?
Thank you.
Is this a trick question? Because you're assuming that people have the experience of feeling like they've seen somebody try to interrupt it or institutional efforts. I'm not sure if it's a trick question.
I don't know if it's a trick question.
I was gonna say, if there is, I haven't seen it. Even when like there have been certain situations that I've heard of, like nothing was done. So like even if there was money being put into it, other than what you do, I haven't seen it anywhere. And I've already been here a year.
Last semester I had a situation of like conspiracy violence. They thought she had something, I don't know how to explain it, and sexual assault last semester in my dorm. And when the cops were informed, they on campus police, they responded to me and my 3 other roommates. Sounds like teen drama.
How validating.
And all 3 of us looked at each other like, oh, okay. And we all walked home pissed off because the on-campus police, who are supposed to protect us, told us that we're just having teen drama. So, and like Grayson said, I only ever see you advocating constantly. I see you always at booths or stuff like that. And even people that are off campus know about you. You've been mentioned in my emails. So it's like,
Wow.
like to reach out to you and stuff. So, but yeah,
Well,
the
thank you.
police on campus, I don't ever need to go with them again. Because
So then what I'm hearing you say is there's not enough energy invested in our law enforcement on campus.
right.
Okay. And Grayson, you're saying that you haven't really seen anything. Anybody else? Have you seen anywhere? Where do you see our campus investing the most energy to interrupt these forces? What majors do we have in here? We have criminal justice and what else? Sociology, psych,
Political science.
political science. Any athletes in here or fraternity or sorority members? Okay, what do you see? Do you see any energy at all being put forth?
No? Okay.
Well, it's actually ironic. I was in a sorority and it's mandatory for every sorority to go through like sexual harassment and like racial awareness training. And yet, not to say too much, but there was a person in my sorority who ended up going through something on the violence tier and nothing was done for her at all, which is literally so ironic. And it was done by a member from a frat. So.
Okay, well, that's really awful. And sad. And I hope that that person was provided with resources, including me. And we can talk later if you like about that, you know, providing that person with some resources. Elliot.
If anything is ever done, it's once violence has already occurred. That's where energy goes. And the only other effort that I've seen is like with the mandatory like trainings that we do about like sexual assault and coercion. And even then those aren't very comprehensive.
How many of you have done the online training that is provided? So would you say that that's an energy put forth by the university? I would. What else do you see in addition to that?
A session on CAPS yesterday with the SQE and CFA or whatever the day before. Students were talking about feeling like they don't have access to CAPS because they've heard from other people it's so hard to get an appointment. And so I think that students were saying in that session that they know that there is, if you can go through the hoops to get in, a chance, but at the time that they're facing crisis, not actually the availability, or that the fact that they know that it's going to be so hard that they kind of give up that or hope their parents' insurance, if they have parents and insurance, whatever, will cover them. So they talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this week in the Star, they were mentioning the blue lights or alternative to the blue lights in a new contract or something. So that's another after the fact thing that I think people were mentioning.
Mm-hmm. But after, like you mentioned, after the fact. Go ahead.
I really appreciate that you brought up CAPS because that was, well, no, that I wasn't in the session, but I read an article last semester in the fall about how people were going through those issues. And I mean, personally, I feel comfortable disclosing this, but I did have sessions with CAPS. And I feel that I only managed to get the sessions because I specifically mentioned that I wasn't looking for counseling or resources on anything having to do with serious matters. And so I feel like CAPS is only willing to provide services for superficial issues like grades or roommate issues, lack of sleep, maybe like minor depression. And I noticed in my own personal sessions that when I was trying to disclose maybe information that might have upset me more than any of those superficial topics, it was quickly swept to the side. And so I do believe that even if you are able to get into that resource, it only goes so far.
And I think that CAPS doesn't, I happen to think very highly of our CAPS department. I may be biased because I report to the director of counseling and psychological services, and she supports me in everything that I do. And really, I say this a lot of the time, I don't represent the university in my position. I represent survivors. And so there have been times where I've had to go up against the institution and go up against some powerful people and not in maintaining my actions and my behavior, because as an advocate, it's what I have to do, and I'm not going to back down. And I can honestly say that Dr. Laura Williams has always supported me in how I roll in my position. As far as therapy is concerned, I know that they because it is an academic calendar, therapy it's hard because good therapy needs consistency, and we're they're away for the summer and things like that, so it can be challenging. And so I hear you and I see you and I feel that. It's hard because it's campus counseling.
I would just like to say that I definitely agree. I do think that CAPS does a good job of offering the support that they can, and I do understand the time limit, and it is difficult to get into hard topics. But just for certain like trigger circumstances, I do feel like sometimes they have to sacrifice going into those topics for reasons such as that.
Yeah, developing a therapeutic relationship takes some time. If you have stuff happening and if you have deep-rooted trauma and things like that, sitting down and talking to a therapist in the first couple of sessions is just sort of a get to know you type of thing. And then you delve deeper into those therapeutic interventions. So it does take time. And I know that it's something they would really like to be able to do. And unfortunately, the time constraints just don't allow for it.
And I think that's a good connection to the image where you're talking about institutional constraints or institutional issues versus interpersonal, right? So maybe students feel like they have a good interpersonal relationship. You feel like you have a good interpersonal relationship with a person who's trying, but there are these constraints, or then people get to know what they hear or the sort of cultural perspectives on people's assumptions or people's reactions or whatever that are more at the institutional level that make the question you asked, I think, a harder one. Like who's trying really hard on campus on an individual level, people would probably have more answers than if you're talking about prevention versus intervention. Like, how do you see those systemic prevention efforts? Like, since the time you've been here, when I started here, which was before you, there wasn't that screening in order to get your financial aid or screening for us as faculty, where we had to do those online trainings. And that was, I'm sure, a response to, cultural normative changes, but probably also some litigation or their insurer making you do that.
Yeah, and law, Title IX law, it's federal law. And so those are requirements, of the law. And it's interesting as we're having this discussion, how law really dictates where the energy is put forth. And so you talked about the online training, and I know we have like 10 minutes left, and I am like really, and I'm sorry that I'm going to just go through, we talked about all of these examples of rape, and I'm sorry that I'm just going to zip through this now because I want to get to the point. The whole point of this is, we see everyday experiences. We didn't really talk about street harassment. So many people experience street harassment, and institutions and systems and cultural and societal norms. So, jokes involving rape. These are at the bottom of the pyramid. Humor can be used covertly to deliver messages that can reinforce negative attitudes towards women, towards all genders, towards our LGBTQ plus folks, towards our queer BIPOC folks. Humor is used covertly to deliver these messages that reinforce negative attitudes towards these folks. It enhances negative attitudes towards individuals that can lead to aggressive behavior. And I love this because this is artwork done by people who were victims of street harassment and catcalling. And this includes a wide range of behaviors that are harmful and constitute sexual harassment. And some actions are commonly overlooked as a part of the continuum of violence, such as whistles and comments about appearance and leering and demanding a smile, sexually explicit gestures, etc. These graphics here are provided by a wonderful, wonderful woman who we actually had on our campus in the first year of COVID when we were all working remotely. And she's written a great book called Don't Tell Me to Smile. And her name is Tatiana Fazlalizada. And she is awesome. And she came here, and this artwork is in her book. And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with somebody. It was during a training, actually, with another professional, and we were talking about street harassment and catcalling. And I usually show a quick video of a catcalling incident, a woman walking through the streets of New York City for 8 hours, and the amount and the incidents of street harassment and catcalling that she experienced. And it's unbelievable how many people are like, "Hey, mama, hey, beautiful, give me a smile," and things like that. And my colleague said, "Well, I talk to people all the time when I'm in the street, and I say, 'Hi, how you doing?' And I'm like, well, you're not really harassing people. It's okay to say hi in that manner. And again, it's be aware, because we talk about intent and impact. So maybe her intent is that she's just being pleasant, but it can be received as harassing. And then I'll just, in schools, my big thing is dress codes. And I'm going to ask y'all, when you were in high school, when you were in middle school, did you have dress codes? How many of you got coded? I don't want to assume gender. I'm not going to assume gender. Most people who get coded are female presenting. Why is that?
I mean, why is that a verb? I didn't even know that was a verb, coding and coded. That's like, what, so outside my experience. This is great.
Something I've just seen, I don't know if it's fully true, but people that are more feminine presenting are more sexualized than male presenting people, which is not always the case, but especially like depending on where you live, like in the South and stuff like that. I got dress coded a lot for something I thought was completely fine. And I would go home and be like, I don't understand why this was fine yesterday, but not fine today. And it would be because a different teacher brought it out and they were like, well, you can't wear that, when there was no one else that it was really bothering.
Do you mind if I ask what you were wearing?
I think I was wearing some Galaxy leggings and a pair of shorts.
Galaxy leggings and a pair of shorts. Yeah. Your colleague next to you.
In my case, not to come off as like weird, but I have bigger boobs than a lot of girls in middle school. Like I had bigger boobs than a lot of them. And I noticed that when I got dress coded, a lot of the time I was wearing the same thing as other girls. But because I had a bigger chest, I got dress coded for it. And I noticed that the people that were dress coding me were always men.
Yep.
It was never my female teachers that
The
were
male
dress
teachers.
coding me. It was my male teachers or my male supervisors or whatever. And I would just think to myself, like, why are you even looking at me when I'm 13 and you're 45? Why are you even looking at me in that way? Why do you notice my breasts? Why do you notice my shoulders? Why do you notice my thighs? My dad doesn't look at me that way, and I dress the same way in front of him. He's never tried to dress code me. He's never tried to tell me you need to change, because my dad doesn't look at me like that.
Your dad isn't objectifying you.
Right.
Right.
And then these men think that they can objectify me, but my English teacher, she has nothing wrong with it.
The whole point of dress coding is because it's objectification of women. It's objectification of the female body. It's objectification. And I know you wanted to say something. I just want to share that when I do this presentation in a classroom, I usually do this in first year classes. So the students are just fresh out of high school. I usually do it in the fall semester of freshman year. And I say to them, I turned, because again, most of the hands, without assuming gender, are female presenting students. None of the male presenting students raise their hands as being coded. And so I address them and I say, why do you, Who are these people who are coding your classmates who think that you are being distracted? If I were you, I'd be like, who the hell are you to tell me that I can't control myself? That I can't stay focused on my classwork or my schoolwork or whatever is happening because somebody has leggings on, yoga pants on? Like, are you shitting me? Like, really? It's incredible. And it starts at such a young age of objectifying the female body. In the legal system, we see evidence of rape culture. We see 1 out of every 1,000 rapes, 995 perpetrators will walk free. What percentage of people who report being sexually assaulted are lying? Do you know what percentage fabricated sexual assaults are? It's anywhere from 4 to 8%, according to the research. 4 to 8% of there are falsely reported sexual assaults. Out of 1,000 assault and battery crimes, 33 criminals are incarcerated. 41 cases will go to a felony conviction. Look at the difference between those statistics. Again, this contributes to rape culture. Victim blaming, we already covered that. Media messages, often messages about consent. We see things like this when why say no when you can say yes? This is for a freaking Taco Bell hot sauce. You want me, hot sauce. It's so normalized in our everyday world. Advertisements. The Burger King, it'll blow your mind away. Interestingly enough, it's a BK Super 7-incher. It'll blow your mind away. And then the first remote control ever invented, a diamond ring. And look at the graphic. All of this is in our everyday lives on billboards. And I'm just showing certain examples. And this was a case that happened in 2013, and how even the press reports on things. We have an even more current situation where we had, I don't ever say perpetrators' names, the perpetrator in the Chanel Miller Stanford case, where he received 3 months of jail time for sexually assaulting an unconscious woman who intervention occurred by people walking by, because he had a promising future as a swimmer. Friend zone is actually contributing to rape culture. The idea of the friend zone supports that the gender expectations that men are owed sex. Slut is how we vilify a woman for exercising her right to say yes. Saying a man's been put in the friend zone is how we vilify a woman for exercising her right, or exercising anybody's right to say no. And it goes even bigger. This conveys the idea that friendship is a failure. It reinforces the pressures of conquest for men and boys, contributing to what you said about how when a male is sexually assaulted by a female, it should be viewed as a conquest. And I've added this recently because I don't know if any of you are familiar with Andrew Tate. He's a misogynistic social media influencer. He is a TikTok star, and he was also on Big Brother, which I know was a really popular show. He had at the time 5 million followers, primarily young men and boys, and he was arrested in Romania for human trafficking and rape. And he is a huge proponent of victim blaming. He actually says things like, women who are raped, they've done something to deserve it. I mean, I'm not even going to give him any other. He has been banned from Meta. He has been banned from TikTok. He has been banned from Instagram, but he still has these little cells of followers, and they're really bad people, and he's really influencing young boys and men. And then we have the Darvo response to sexual assault accusations. And we see this every day when someone comes forward and they say, this person sexually assaulted me. We saw it in the Kavanaugh trials. We saw it with Donald Trump. We've seen it with so many people. We see it in Title IX all the time. Deny, I didn't do that. Attack, go on the attack, and reverse victim and offender. So now the perpetrator is targeting the person they've already harmed and saying that they are, I know. So very quickly, taking action, creating a culture of care and consent. Much of what we accept as inevitable is in fact the expression of values and attitudes that can change. And we have gone over by a few minutes. I'm just going to ask you really quickly, what are some ways that we can work to change a culture that supports rape? And Bernice, there's 2 flyers. I'm going to give you handouts so that you can talk about this maybe in your class, maybe amongst each other. But there are ways that we can work to end rape culture, and it all factors on that. But we talk about the top interventions. The top interventions are bystander intervention, but it's about what's happening on the bottom. Bystander intervention is when we think we're seeing something that's going to happen and we're going to intervene. But what can we do about the acts, about the beliefs on the bottom? And one of the things I also want to point out on this pyramid, the invasion of space, this is where we see a lot of intent versus impact. People will say, oh, that wasn't their intention. That wasn't their intention. It doesn't matter what anybody's intention is. It's about how it was received and the impact of how it was received. So it doesn't fucking matter that my intent wasn't to do that. It matters how I impacted that human. And if I've impacted someone, then I need to own it and I need to apologize for it. And I also want to point out real quickly, when we talk about the energy that we put into at this institution, the minimal energy that we see at this institution, we have been audited by Cozen and Associates, and I think some of you as students did participate in providing feedback to them. We are being audited by our state government. We have to put energy in at the bottom of that pyramid and really do the work. So what Bernice is passing out to you, actually, there's actually a wonderful example of ending it. And I think I have it here, but it's not going to be clear. It's the exterior circle is structural. So it's about working on decolonization, no borders, reproductive justice, queer and trans liberation, economic justice, feminism, disability justice. And then the inner circle is the joyful sexuality, the loving communities, the cultural and the healthy relationships. And the center is the ways that we can work to end rape culture. And I just want to ask if you can think of any ways that you as students at Sonoma State University can do work to end rape culture here. And then we'll end it.
I think one of the most effective ways to help end rape culture, especially as young adults, is to hold your friends accountable and to point out to your friends when they've said or done something that is not okay. Because I think that people are more likely to listen to their friends in general because they already respect and care about what the person has to say. And I think that if you let a friend's poor behavior slide, it sends a message to them that it's actually okay.
Yeah.
And it helps reinforce rape culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. Act up. Intervene. Say something. See something, say something. But again, it's that like when it's when we hear a rape joke, like saying, that's not funny. That's not funny. When we hear a joke about race or something like that, that's not funny. 1 in 4. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that just overall like education of the topic because I know it wasn't very much touched on, but we talked about like homophobia and stuff like that. And like me and a couple of my friends walked off campus and automatically got hate crimes. And we just stood there and we're like, what? And we know they went to Sonoma. But like we have no idea who they were, and I'm pretty sure they don't know who we are. And so like just education on like people thinking that's funny and it's really not, and it can really startle people, and it's definitely not okay. And I think a lot of people just think it's a really big joke when it's not.
It's not. It's not a joke. We're seeing things happening in our country right now. Today, we have 3 state representatives in Tennessee that were expelled from doing their job as representatives because they stood up with their constituents who they represent. 2 weeks ago, 6 people were killed in a school in Nashville or in Tennessee. And these 3 state reps stood up with their constituencies. And now the white, cisgender, powerful men in that House of Representatives have all guarded together to expel these 3 people. 2 of them are men of color and 1 of them is a woman. One state representative, about a year ago, was brought up as being a child abuser. Guess what happened to him? Nothing. But we're expelling 3 people because they stood up with their constituents against gun violence. Go ahead.
I think ending rape culture also starts with like teaching children not to follow like all these stereotypes and these roles that women are supposed to be given, or what you're supposed to dress or how you're supposed to act, or being told that's not ladylike at 6 years old because you're playing in the mud with your brothers, but when he does it, it's fine. And I think being taught at a young age and teaching like boys and girls, like just basic facts and letting them choose their own path rather than playing these roles in their head is also going to stop rape culture.
Yep. Dispel gender roles. We have to dispel gender roles. Gender is a construct. We have to dispel gender roles.
Okay.
I love what you said. So
And-
you have the handout. I'm just going to go to, if you ever want to reach out to us, this is our phone number. I'm in Beaujolais Village. This is how to reach me. This is how to reach Bernice at bmandes@ourverity.org, our advocacy website. And we have a great Instagram account. Elliot, are you okay with me introducing you? Okay, Elliot is the student assistant for confidential advocacy, and Elliot does all of the social media promote work. And it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. In addition to Social Justice Week, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, hence the teal hair. My hair is teal because that's the color of prevention for April. So I dye my hair teal for the month of April. Elliot is doing an incredible job with the 30 Days of Sam, as well as all the other incredible work. And this is how to reach us. And I really am grateful that you are here. I'm sorry that I got really lost in the pyramids. I really wanted to get into the how can we dispel rape culture.
Well,
And-
let's invite folks to talk about it in the hallway, but in our effort to be intersectional, we want to respect workers' rights. And
Thank you.
as they're at the end of their shifts, we can
And you've
transition to
had
the
a
hallway.
long day.
So
thank you.
let's give a round of applause for Susan. And don't forget to fill out your evaluation forms. Tomorrow we have both lunch and dinner and awards, including one that Susan nominated another person who works in that same office for. So join us for a documentary about reparations, the Japanese internment reparations awardees fighting for Black reparations, and for our award ceremony and lunch and dinner. Thank you.
Thank you so much.